Hello and welcome to From Portugal with Love. I'm your host, Lauren Covis. Today I'm thrilled to be talking to Chef David Santos. He's a chef with roots from Portugal and alumni to some of the top kitchens like Per Se and Boulé, and he's the creator of a cult supper club called Segredo, which means secret in Portuguese. We're going to dig into his Portuguese upbringing and talk all things food and creativity. So, first, thank you for coming, David. We are
My
so excited
pleasure.
to have you. Um, you are a Jersey guy.
I am born and
I'm a,
raised.
I'm a Jersey girl.
Uh-huh.
And you grew up in the suburbs. So, what part?
So I was born in Perth Amboy.
Okay.
My parents came over kind of sort of after the initial Nork,
Yeah.
run, if you will. And then a lot of people started going into like Elizabeth and Perth Amboy. So my parents ended up, they initially were living actually with my aunt in Rawway. And then when they got their own place, when my mom finally came over after a year, my dad being here, they got a place in Perth Amboy. And then after that, we moved to Ford's, and they're still there in Ford's.
Are you first generation born?
I am, yeah, first
Okay.
generation. Yeah,
Same here.
yeah,
Parents came through Newark,
yeah, of
settled
course.
in Newark in the beginning, then Kearney.
Yeah,
So lots of roots up there.
yeah.
I live in Monmouth County now.
Oh, nice, nice.
So, growing up, being first generation, I'm assuming your household was very similar to mine. What was the food scene like? The smells, the feeling like, what was your regularity in the kitchen there?
You know, so my parents grew up pretty poor in Portugal, and I think as many kind of immigrants do when they come over is they did what they knew, right? So
Yep.
me growing up, the foods that I was surrounded by were obviously like very Portuguese in nature. But on top of that, like, we raised rabbits and doves and pigeons for food, not as pets.
Yeah.
but,
Oh, yeah.
but food,
We had a pet rabbit in our
pet
garden
rabbit,
too.
and then, we went fishing. We had a huge garden. Like, those fresh flavors and local, if you will, flavors were a huge part of, my upbringing, and finding food on the table was, hugely important. And I remember I have this very funny, vivid memory as a child, with my mom being in the grocery store at the Pathmark in Perth Amboy, and there was peaches there, but it was like winter, and she was so confused
Why? Yeah.
why there was peaches in the winter. Like she didn't know where they came from. And so that kind of farm to table, whatever you want to throw on it,
Yeah.
was very much my upbringing. It was about local, what's available,
Yeah. You cook what
what you
was
can
in
afford.
season. Yeah.
So that was the food. We had the things, the salt cods here and there, and grilling sardines in summer. Like those are very fond food memories. Hand making sausages every fall, making wine with my dad every fall. Like those were just, we were like super immersed in food at all times,
I think it's just what you just mentioned is the staple of all of like the baseline, I want to say, of the culinary
Yeah,
cuisine, kind of because I grew up. So I know you're from Nizhedeh, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So actually, we just bought our boys there for the
Nice,
first
the
time,
best.
and they just wanted to go because of the waves, and
Of course, of course.
we went all the way down
You got to
there.
go now.
Yeah. And like they say, like, oh my God, when you go to Nizhedeh, the garb, the traditional
Yeah,
clothes. And I laughed because I was like, well, each region has their own kind of look. And yes,
for sure.
Nizhedeh is very specific.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and when we walked the beach where where they dry out the
Yeah,
fish,
dried fish. Yeah.
and my younger one's walking around like this. And I'm like, come on, dude.
It's not even that bad.
I
You're in
know.
open air.
It's amazing. And you got the old guy sitting there like whittling something while the
Yeah.
fish are still drying.
Yep.
No, and we
Yep.
took the tram up, but
Of course.
it's a beautiful part of Portugal
I love it.
to be from.
Yeah,
Do
I
you go
love
back
it.
often?
So when I was a kid, we would go back to my most, well, not, I shouldn't say most. All of my mom's family stayed in the little small town, out
Yeah.
we're like 10, 15 minutes from us there. And my dad, who grew up in the town next to her, was one of eight, and six of them came to America.
Okay.
So only one stayed in Portugal, and then one moved to Paris at a young age. And so my mom, we would go back truly because of my mom's family, because it was not like today. You got WhatsApp and everything else. You can
Right.
talk to people. You had to pay for long distance back then. It wasn't cheap. I remember
My
like
parents
my
used to
dad,
calling
like,
cards.
yeah, exactly. I remember my dad trying to figure out which company would be best, because of the long distance rates and stuff.
Yeah.
And in Jersey had specific rates, obviously, because there's such a Portuguese population here that it was a deal. But we went back to see them, really and truly.
Right.
So we would go back every 2 to 3 years. We couldn't really afford to go every year or anything, but we would go back usually every 2 to 3 years. And then that lasted up until college, and then
Yeah.
I've started. And
With that many aunts and uncles moving over, were so yesterday, I was talking to someone and they were like, "Did you grow up in a three-family home? Did
yeah,
people come in and out?" Like I always feel like that's a very traditional way that first generations are born. You're like, "Oh,
absolutely.
my uncles and aunts." Like, was it like Sunday dinner? Was everyone in everyone's business helping out?
You know, uh, I wouldn't go as far. I mean, everybody, they're family, right? So I guess in some way you're always in each other's business somehow, right?
Yeah.
You know, uh, so my dad, they first moved into like an apartment behind a Portuguese family's home, like they knew from,
Yeah.
and then when they bought their own place, they bought a two-story, and so we lived on the bottom, and then my uncle lived upstairs, and again, we spent days together, dinners,
Yeah.
every party, every festival, if you will, that or celebration, not festival, was usually done at our place because we had a big kind of backyard, and it was just kind of easy because we were all pretty centrally located in that area. Like I said, my one aunt was in Rawway, and then another one moved there, and then Perth Amboy and Fords, and so
Yeah.
everybody was in that
So no,
Middlesex
everyone, yeah.
County, yeah.
Because I read somewhere that you used to wake up at 5 a.m. and bake bread with your aunt.
That was in Portugal, actually.
Oh, when you went back over there to
Yeah,
visit.
so I've always loved food. It's just, again, it's always been a part of me. My mom didn't make bread. She wasn't a big baker. Great cook, but not a baker. And so when we were in Portugal, we would go for 6 weeks, 4 6 weeks, something like that. And so my aunt, who was a cook by profession, she would make bread once or twice a week, and so I would always wake up with her, at like 5 a.m. when I was there, and start the bread and make the bread with her, and like take care of the chickens and everything else I love to do, and all that good stuff, and make
It's so
rechoi. She's very
simple, right?
huh?
It's so simple, those things. But I think
I
they
mean,
mold you in this, well, especially being someone, you and I being in the restaurant and culinary world,
yeah.
it helps you have a different appreciation.
You don't realize it when you're in it.
Right.
It's the knowledge is of those things is wasted on us old folk. But I loved it and I adored it. I even so we were also good friends with the town baker who was actually lived in Rhode Island for a while and then moved his family back there, and so I would go there when I wasn't with my aunt. I would go there and make like pastéis nata and like more different breads and stuff. Like that stuff is just like I just did it because I liked it. It wasn't that like I thought anything of it. I didn't even think my career at that point was going to be in food. Like that wasn't like what I was planning on. I
Right.
didn't really know what I was going to do really, but you know, you have these really fun, kind of beautiful experiences as a young person in food, and you don't really realize, you know, how impactful they are down the road, you know. Uh, but it's, you know, like I said, it's you don't realize it. That's the big thing.
Yeah, no, because you're like in it, and I guess it stays with you because over the years when things start to evolve and grow, it's kind of rooted in you, so it shows up. And I always say that because like being first generation from immigrant parents, you really learn work ethic, you learn what
Yeah,
the value is, and it had a huge impact on me. I don't know about you,
for
but
sure. I mean, just work ethic alone, almost to a fault, honestly. You know, it's almost like too much. You know, my dad is someone who doesn't know anything but work. You know, it's
right.
just like he's been working forever. You know, he started working in a brick factory when he was 9 years old. You know, and he's 77 now, and he's still unloading trucks at the grocery store. You know, like
They
doing
can't sit
big.
still.
It's like manual labor. The dude's like the strongest 77-year-old on the planet Earth. You know, like, and he's like 5'2", nothing. You know, but like that work in that work ethic, you know, was instilled in us as children. You know, like
Yeah.
we did the things. You know, we when we moved out of that home, for instance, you know, then my dad became a landlord. You know, and so anything that had to be done on that house, you didn't hire people to do it.
Yeah,
You crazy?
listen, the Portuguese, we do it, or you do it yourself. There's no,
You know,
I
I
can
was,
fix it.
dude, I remember vividly being 10 to 11 years old, and we had to replace the cement in the backyard. There's like a platform in front of the garage, and I'm out there at 10 years old swinging a sledgehammer, you know, breaking concrete, you know, at
Gotta
10
learn
11
sometime.
years old. Like, what the hell? Can you imagine a 10-year-old doing something like that today? Like, that's unheard of, you know?
No. Child labor laws now.
But that's the work ethic, you know, that's
Yeah.
kind of instilled in you, you know, from immigrant parents. You know, I think that is the beauty of immigrant and first generation peoples in particular, that, you know, most people don't come to a new place to hang out. You know, they're coming to a place to
Better
build
opportunity.
better opportunity, and you got to work for those opportunities. And you know, we see as first generation, I think we see it obviously firsthand.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, so it's
I always say, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, like, I've never met a harder group of working people
yeah,
before.
yeah.
Um, were
It's
you were you a Portuguese speaking household or an
yeah,
English speaking?
yeah. First
Okay.
language I learned was Portuguese, and then I started to learn English. Uh,
Okay.
Learning, we went to Portuguese school. We had the Portuguese Sporting Club in Perth
Yeah.
Amboy, who my dad was the treasurer of for many years, and my uncle was the president. Uh, was a big, you know, part of kind of, you know, growing up. You know, you did big events there and stuff, and
Oh, it's like the
Portuguese.
hall where everyone met, hung out, played
Exactly. Yeah.
cards, the
Yeah.
whole thing.
We
Yeah.
could have receptions there and things like that, you know. And the Portuguese school was there.
Hmm.
If I'm remembering correctly, it was twice a week. I think maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Tuesdays. I was about to say it was Tuesdays and Thursdays
Yeah.
at 3 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we same thing. We spoke Portuguese at home, but then I went to English school and I came home answering questions in English because.
Yeah.
But with my grandmother, there was you spoke Portuguese. My dad always said when he grew up, like there was no English in the house.
Yeah, it's for us it was like my dad was very much, you know, proud to be here, and you know, obviously still is. And so he was, you know, adamant about learning English, and so he actually learned English by watching Sesame Street. Funny enough, in my aunt's house, that's how he learned to speak English, and obviously working, and you know,
Yeah, right.
and through that. And so my mom came over. He was very adamant. My mom wanted to, you know, learn Spanish because it was easier, you know,
Right.
and my dad was very adamant about, like, listen, we're in America, you need to learn, you know, how to speak English, and so they both did. and they're both great. I mean, many years later, but they always worked hard to try to be good. At home it's more comfortable, obviously, to speak Portuguese.
Right.
But for me, it was funny. I spoke Portuguese up until going to kindergarten. I started learning English. In between kindergarten and first grade, I went to Portugal, and that was the first year I think I started Portuguese school. And when I came back from Portugal, I forgot all the English that I had learned.
Because
And
you were
so,
so immersed in it over
yeah,
there.
so I went into first grade not speaking English again, and so they asked if my parents would take me out of Portuguese school, so because it was messing me up, a little too much.
Yeah.
And so I only ended up having 1 year of Portuguese um, at Portuguese school, but you speak it at home, you speak it pretty fluently, and
Oh yeah. I always say my Portuguese now is country background. I can handle it, but by no means can I write perfectly.
oh
I,
god,
I when
yeah,
I learned English by second grade, like the English classes, they were learning how to like read and write really proper like essays and
right,
paragraphs. I had huge learning disabilities.
yeah, me too,
So between that and the language barrier was like I kind of
yeah.
struggled with it.
It's
So
tough. It's tough. I'm dyslexic.
okay.
I've found out later on in life, but um, I always knew that I had a problem like learning and reading. So I had to really rely on my memory, and that's really how I learned language. I often joke that I speak three languages very fluently, and I can't write and spell in any of them. It's
Oh,
just
my spelling is atrocious, so I
it's
got you
it's
on
the
that.
truth. Like my friends make fun of me all the time. Like
Yeah.
in text threads of like correcting me or constant. I was like, what do you guys want from me? This is like.
Isn't it funny though? Because so everyone I've ever met or really worked with in the culinary world, we're all a little messed up, a little crazy,
Yeah,
but a lot of us have like that. I call it the ADD, but that
yeah,
high energy
yeah.
and some major learning issues. But I think it's where our side of the creativity of the brain
Sure. Yeah,
is so strong.
yeah,
And I don't know about you, but like I need to work with my hands. Like
yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean,
I
it's
can't sit behind a computer.
yeah,
And I think that that's where we shine. So
for sure.
sometimes when people look at like those just like learning disabilities like as a negative, I'm like, you know what? But it also helps me in so many other my strengths.
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sure, it's what is normal
Right.
by any standard, right? But if you have all of a sudden develop like a great memory, like in my case, you know, it allows you to, work in a
Yeah.
different way. It's maybe might not be traditional in any, way, shape, or form, but like I learned three languages.
That's
Right?
awesome.
I mean, not a lot of people can say they speak three languages fluently,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I know a little bit of French and a little bit of Italian, so this
When
is
you
all
don't know,
done
you
through,
just use your
yeah,
hands.
exactly. This is all done through memory,
Yeah.
it's not done through traditional learning.
That's
And
awesome.
I agree with you. I think creatives in general oftentimes have, some sort of learning disability. I think, but almost a lot of times, I think it's what allows them to actually be creative. Because they have to think differently,
Hmm.
oftentimes, to learn, and so that ability to think differently allows you to be more creative because you're already different.
Right.
And so you do see that quite a bit in the creative space, whether it be food or art or whatever it is.
So when I was reading up on you, and I loved this, well, first, your dad was a soccer player. Was it
Was,
near
yeah.
FIFA?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Did that push you to like sports? Or, I mean, what pork chop doesn't like soccer? But
Yeah,
FIFA
yeah,
is part,
exactly.
it's in the blood. But
Yeah.
did that at home influence, like, did they want you to play sports or what you got interested in?
My parents, were they were very supportive of, what we wanted to do. Um, so much so that, even when, you know, most Portuguese kids didn't even go away to college, right? They a lot of them traveled to, to school or went to, a community college or whatever. Like my brother was the first one in our family to go away to school, and I was the second one. And so they didn't really, they were good about like not pushing us in any singular direction.
Okay.
They love sports. My dad in particular is a big baseball, soccer, and football fan. But he never was like, hey, like you need to play XYZ. None of us played soccer growing up. We liked soccer, but none of us were put into soccer. We were put into baseball. Like baseball became like our sport, and so my brother and I really,
household.
yeah, it was really interesting. I don't know what was behind that per se. Like most Portuguese kids I knew growing up, were in soccer at some point. We just were never pushed in that direction. And not that any of us we could have played. We were both really. My brother and I were both, and my sister were both all really good athletes. But none of us ever got pushed into a specific sport.
What position do you play in baseball?
So I was a third baseman and a pitcher for a very long time, and then I injured my elbow kind of badly. Not like surgery badly, but during the season, and you couldn't really stop me from playing. So I ended up shifting to second, and I couldn't pitch after that really. For that season, and I shifted to second base, and then I stayed at second base for the rest of my career, all through college. I didn't end up pitching anymore, although I would have enjoyed probably pitching quite a bit. I just became more focused on playing the field instead of being on the mound.
So I have two boys, 15 and 12,
Nice.
and I'm very outnumbered here at home, especially when it comes to sports, but we are a very heavy baseball team,
Nice.
family. They're both in travel, but my older one's a catcher and my
Nice.
younger one's a pitcher.
Nice. Yeah.
And they do love the game, and I never wanted to be what they called like a dance mom, like to push my kids into things, and
Yeah.
they have naturally really started to love it, because at the age of 15 you either love it to stick with it,
Yeah, you're either going to do it or you're not. Yeah.
but I think it's taught them so much about character, discipline, teamship, like
Life is sport, like
and ownership and maturity. Like
Yeah.
I think that's all come through that platform for them.
without a doubt. I mean,
And
please go
no,
ahead.
I think it's just a strong point, like
Yeah.
that they're going to take that in all the skills they do with their life.
Without a doubt. For me, I remember very vividly when they stopped keeping score in Little League. This is beyond, but past my time, obviously. I remember being really kind of upset about it, because to me, playing baseball taught me how to lose, right? Like, you're going to lose in life.
Right.
And if you don't have the experience of loss, as a kid, as a child, I don't think you handle it well later in life. And I remember my brother was on the Dodgers, right? And he's 3 years older than me, so he's 2 divisions up. And my mom got a phone call, and I hate the Yankees. Okay, I'm a Mets fan. I fucking hate the Yankees. Okay, and it was tradition in the league, in Ford's Clara Barton Baseball League, that you were put on the same team that your siblings were on. So it was kind of like you formed a dynasty of
Okay.
thing. My mom got a call, and I'll never forget this call. She gets off the phone. She goes, "Oh, David," and I was like, "What?" She's like, "You're gonna be so mad." And I was like, "What? What happened?" And she's like, "You're on the Yankees now." I was like, I got traded as a kid, and it was that team was so it hurt, and that team was so bad. They were so bad, and and I was good, like I was really good, and we lost all the time, and it taught me to be on this bad thing and show up every day still and do my best. And it was disappointing, obviously. No one likes to lose, but it really taught me how to lose. And I think sport does that for kids. And I understand, like, this is not all kids need to be in sports, and
Right.
sports isn't for everybody. I totally understand that. But something in life, I think, has to give you those lessons and help you learn how to cope with things when it's not that serious. It feels
Yeah.
serious when you're a kid, but in the grand scheme of life, like, it's not that serious.
I
So
always say to my kids, it's a blimp, it's a pin
yeah,
drop on this bigger view of life. But at the same time, you better grow some tough skin because no one's going to care what you think out there. Like
yeah,
you
it's
need to know. So I agree with you on the sports aspect. I think
yeah,
it's even helped me in the kitchen when I was
for sure.
first starting off, and you know,
Yeah, you have to have kitchens. You have to have thick skin, especially as a woman coming up, in a kitchen,
very much
in
so.
that area. You got to be real thick skinned. You got to tolerate a lot of nonsense. I think things are getting better in that department, but back then it was rough.
Oh yeah.
It was super rough, and if you don't know how to handle those things, it makes them super, super hard, and it really could break you down really badly. And I think a lot of kids today don't have that skill set because they didn't learn it as a young age. Maybe
Very
they'll
young.
learn it later, don't get me wrong, but like
Yeah, it's
learning
something
it
that's
young.
instilled.
Yeah, if it's instilled and you learn how to deal with things, I think it's always better when you're younger. Yeah, you're more
Yeah.
absorbent.
More resilient.
Resilient, yeah.
But I
Absorbent and
no,
resilient.
I I agree with you because when I went to culinary school, my first module I was put in, and I went to New England Culinary Institute. I was the only girl, and you do tough skin. But where did you go? You went to Johnson and Wales.
Johnson Wales, yeah, I went to Johnson Wales.
What was that experience?
It was great. I mean, I loved Johnson Wales. I went to play baseball, like, in
Oh,
truth. I I'm not a huge advocate for culinary schools personally,
okay.
especially today. I just think they're a waste of money in a lot of ways. Only because I think everything you learn in a culinary school you can get paid to learn on your first job. So I don't
Mhm.
really think it's that. If you're going to do alternate things in the culinary world, I think that makes a lot of sense. But if you're trying to be like a chef, you know in the one of the greats, if you will, I think it makes a little more sense not to go to school, in truth. But I went to school to play, because I went to Johnson Wales in particular because they had a Division III baseball team, and I wanted to continue my baseball career after college in some way. Never had any delusions of grandeur, playing in the pros or anything. So, but I did love to play. It was what I really like. I enjoyed cooking and baseball. Those are the two things I really enjoyed in life. And if I can go to a place and do both, that's kind of why I
Right.
made
Well,
this.
you hit the lottery then.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. That's it.
now, like I had a podcast with David Late, and we
Uh-huh.
were talking when he went to culinary school later on in life, and I said, growing up in the kitchen, did you feel though like you had an upper hand? Because when I went to culinary school, there was a lot of young kids that came out that just like, I want to be a chef,
Right.
and I'm
Sure.
going to go and learn, and they hadn't even held a knife.
Yeah.
And understanding how to clean garlic, which is like some of the big. I mean, I've been cleaning garlic since I was six,
Yeah.
so I can
Yeah.
peel a potato with a paring knife and not a
Yeah,
peeler,
exactly. I was just talking about that yesterday. Funny enough, peeling
and
with
my
a
skin
paring knife.
was thinner than yeah, my
Yeah.
skin is thinner than probably with the peeler
Yeah.
because there was no waste.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I don't know if I ever really, like, said that out loud, like, oh, I have an advantage because, of how I grew up. But, like, I knew I definitely had the advantage in, like, by the age of, 18, by the time I went to college, I had helped kill and break down literally every animal that you eat. And because my dad raised animals, I would help with the slaughtering. In Portugal,
Oh,
my uncle's a pig farmer. I would help, slaughter a pig. I was in both ends. I would help give, deliver the piglets, and
Yeah.
then I would be a part of the end game too, and I really appreciated that side of it, and I really felt that it made me appreciate the sacrifice, that an animal gives. So I had a very keen insight onto like not wasting, appreciation of the product, and so from that aspect, I definitely felt I had probably an upper hand, over
Yeah.
in culinary school because I had done all that stuff. I never did culinary, like I never had to fine dice something, blah blah blah. So definitely those
There's a
skills I
reality
never.
to what really is presented out
Yeah,
in the restaurant world. But I mean, and I have a, believe me, I have my questions for your experiences, but it's really funny because what you just said, a lot of times people ask about like food and why I'm so passionate about where it comes from. And I said, it's because I really, really was taught there is no waste, that everything can be
yeah,
repurposed
exactly,
for use. You can use the whole animal. I mean,
exactly.
first chicken was at like 9.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah,
so, and I remember that my grandfather used to have this, like a wooden workbench,
uh,
and his garage was open, and they killed the pig and they
uh,
laid it across to
yeah,
strip out the blood.
or,
And then
yeah,
it was, the casing was getting washed, the
yep.
meat was all, they had 2 chest freezers between that.
Every Exactly. Everybody came together to
To do it, the
butcher,
meat was getting
clean.
salted,
Yep.
everything, like all of
Yep.
that really made you respect food, respect
Totally.
where it came from. And sometimes when I look at some of these really well-established, amazing chefs, they all talk about that in their career, that
Yeah.
their
For
grandmother,
sure.
that's how they appreciate food, growing it themselves, because
Yeah.
I think then you have so much pride and ownership in what you're putting out there.
There's just a Without having those experiences, I think there's a disconnect in a lot of ways. And listen, you can still be a great chef and everything else. I'm not, I would
Right.
never take something away from someone. But I think the people who, even just a garden, never mind. Listen, not everyone has the opportunity to, kill an animal
Yeah.
respectfully and everything, right? I understand someone not having that opportunity, but having a garden, I think, is hugely important in a chef's life, and it doesn't have to be that big. Listen, I have a grow tent in my bedroom right now that I have like 5 flats of different romaines, and I pick romaine every week, and I pick about a pound of romaine every week that I
That's
eat
awesome.
for like. But I need to do that. It's part of like who I am,
Right.
and so I think having those experiences are so important to really understanding food. And so many people are just so wasteful in a lot of ways, and like growing up the way I did, and I'm sure that you did, that's not, that wasn't an option,
No, in my
like
grandmother's house, there was a basin on the counter with a plastic bag, so all the scraps for the pigs.
pigs, yeah,
Like,
pigs, yeah,
even like you turn, like the mentality of that was the
yeah,
turnover to where growing up, like if you're making soup, first of all, we don't buy stock because you're going to put
yeah,
chicken or beef into it to make the
exactly,
stock and the
yeah,
broth. But I think that even in the old world French kitchens, even with some of the best chefs, that's the basis of where you start. Like,
for sure.
which, I mean, you've worked at some pretty nice places. Like,
I have.
one that I would love to pick your brain about is Per Se
Sure, yeah,
and Thomas Keller, because I think his cooking style, the concept around the vegetables, the growth, the
yeah,
real love of where your food comes from.
yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about working for Per Se?
Is per se was a very interesting and unique place to work. It's definitely not for everyone, and in truth, in the end, it probably wasn't really for me. Um, Although I did love my time there, stylistically speaking, who I am, I always say I was more boule than per se,
Okay.
but I loved that I had those two experiences, one right after the other, because it actually taught me kind of what kind of chef I wanted to be. Where like the boule side of things was like it was the Wild West. You know, people were quitting every day. You know, just the way you got to the end was so hard and so difficult, and like just craziness all the time, every day. And per se was like super organized, super structured, super directional, you know, like you knew you had to be on this line and going down this path. And it teaches you that structure. And it also did. Now, both chefs really loved ingredients and super passionate about ingredients. And per se, in particular, you know, getting these vegetables from these people. And when they come through the door, it wasn't that they just came through the door. Like when they came through the door, one, just checking them, making sure they reach quality that you believe in, you know. And then at that point, you didn't just dump them into a container and throw them in the fridge, right? Everything had to be laid out perfectly, paper towels on the bottom, labeled perfectly. It taught you this level of respect for that ingredient that most places, especially at that time when I worked there, most other places didn't have. People were doing great things, don't get me wrong, but Thomas really was about like, hey, this is the thing we're getting. And although on some level, you know, between like little tournays, like that kind of thing was maybe a little bit wasteful, but what wasn't was like the protein side of things. You know, everything was saved. You know, fish trimmings were used for, you know, pates and, you know, mousses and things like that. Like we really utilized as much as we can outside of that, like, you know, very pretty, you know, knife cut situation, you know.
Right.
Outside of that, like everything was utilized really, really well. And I always had a lot of respect for that part of it because of who I was at that, you know, at that time, or am now. But I enjoyed it. But again, I'm not, because I am, you know, that kind of creative person. It's hard for me to like follow this singular path. You know, I like to.
Almost a regiment. Well, like
Yeah, it
you
is.
know,
I mean, it
it's a
is.
regiment. It's in that old world French run
Yeah,
kitchen.
exactly.
And
I chase too many butterflies to stay on that path sometimes,
but
you
you say
know.
you're a little bit more boulet.
I'm way more boulet than I am.
I've heard has been very extreme conditions to work there.
That would say, that would, yeah, that would be accurate. I would say the time at boulet was measured in like dog years. Like if you made a year of boulet, it was like making 7 years anywhere else.
Gotcha.
I mean, it was. I love the man. Like I got, you know, R.I.P. But I fed into it because I liked the pressures of, again, because of sport. You know, getting up to the plate when the game is on the line. You either have that sort of kind of thing in you or you don't. You know, and for me, working at Boulet was that every day. The day I staged at Boulet, I walked in. I should have told me everything I needed to know at that point, but I walked in. The There's a station called the Panache station. It was in charge of the most expensive ingredients in house. Basically, you were responsible for cooking the foie gras and the Kobe beef, right, and one or two other things, but those two things in particular. I showed up. The Panache guy didn't show up. He was a no call, no show. So I worked the Panache station that day. They didn't know who the hell I was.
Because
They had no idea who I was. A guy didn't show up, and the guy who didn't show up happened to be on that station. So I worked the Panache station that night, handling and cooking the most expensive ingredients in the house. You know, and it was like my trial by fire. And of course, you know, was offered a position there because I survived. You know, and and then that place just became survival. Like it was very much, people quit every day almost, and you were so busy. It was the era of like restaurants being probably busier than they've ever been. You know, at that point, we would do 150 covers at lunch, and then do 250, between 200 and 300 covers at dinner, depending on the weekend, and your mandatory schedule, your minimum mandatory schedule at that time was 6 days. And one of those days had to be a double because you had to work a double because your station partner, that was his day off. So one of those 6 days you had to work from 6 a.m. till 2 a.m., and the rest of the time you worked, 16 to 18-hour days no matter what.
Yeah.
You worked. I don't think I ever worked a week at Boulet that wasn't 80 hours. A lot of times I slept at Danube. Danube was next door. It was his other restaurant. I slept at the dining room at Danube so many times because it was no point in going home. You had to be back the next morning.
The thing is, it teaches you, I feel like, the resilience in this
Yeah.
business, something like an experience like that, to where, like you said, you like that you did both of them back to back.
Yeah.
So I feel like you took something from per
Absolutely.
se
Yeah.
that really complemented to where maybe when you were thrown into Boulay, like, okay, I can do this. I can stay organized. I can stay on top of it. But at the same time, you're fiery and ready to go. And
Yeah.
like I know when I used to love when service came, where I'd get in at 11, prep my station. I worked at Picasso in Vegas, and I staged. I'd do 3 months there for free to prove that
Yeah.
I wanted the
Of course.
job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cleaning call fat, cleaning foie, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, dicing concassé tomatoes this
Yeah.
big. Like it was just,
So funny.
but once service started, and I had really short hair at the time. I wore a bandana, and I popped down a Red Bull, and I'd be like, "Let's go!" And I'd get on the line, and I would
Fucking
love
Red Bull.
every second of it.
Red Bull would just come out when I was at Boulet. It just come out, and they were driving the Red Bull cars around and just giving out Red Bulls. Dude, they would stop at the restaurant every day and
Yes.
give us a case of Red Bull. And we would just pound Red Bulls every day. That can't be good for you.
No, I'd like to say that the chef life is people are like, "Oh my God, you're a chef. You must eat so good." And I was
So
like,
cute.
between cigarettes, Red Bull, booze,
I didn't smoke. I've never
chicken
smoked. Thank God.
fingers,
Yeah, smoking and drugs were I'm rare as a chef because I've not done a drug, and cocaine was everywhere when I was coming up. I mean, it still is, but it was everywhere. I never smoked cigarettes because I was allergic to them, so that wasn't really an
Well,
option
that
for
worked in your
me.
favor then.
Yeah, and then I don't have a tattoo, so it was
You're really ixing all the chef.
I'm telling you, it's wild.
cliche.
I marched to the beat of my own drum.
Hey, that's good. So after those amazing experiences, did you fall into wanting to do your own thing? I know you traveled a lot during your career.
Yeah, I travel a fair amount. I mean, listen, you can always travel more. That's for certain.
Yeah.
So when I was married at that time, that's when I had moved to New York. I was in Jersey originally. I was at the Rhode Island Inn for a little while, and then I was at Restaurant Nicholas for a little while.
Down
And
the
after
street from where I live.
yeah, right, exactly. After Nicholas is when I got married and moved to the city, and after 2 years in the city, after doing Boulet first and then Per Se, we kind of my ex-wife and I had kind of an idea of we wanted to go to California just because, and I'd never been there at that point, and there was a lot of fun things happening in California at that time, and so we made a plan to go to California with a stop in Chicago. I was going to do a year or two in Chicago and then go to California. So I ended up moving to Chicago after Per Se and work in Chicago. And I was only in Chicago for a year. And I was at a restaurant that's no longer there. There's a place called Butter, who was under a former Thomas Keller guy named Ryan Poley, who I think he's in Nashville now. But anyway.
Okay.
While I was in Chicago, I kind of started thinking less about going to California, and my ex was kind of missing her family, and so we ended up making the move back to Jersey, where I became the CDC at Restaurant Nicholas, where I
Okay.
was CDC there for like 3 years. And then after that, that's actually I got divorced after that, and then moved back to the city, and I went through kind of some shitty jobs for a little while, and then I started the supper club, and that's kind of where I think my career started to pick back up again.
I was reading about it, and I think first of all, I love the name.
My sister
Um,
came up with the name actually.
I love the name. I think, and you know what's so funny because um, when you were doing this, you probably were doing it. I'm assuming in my mind to be like, okay, I need to pay the bills. I need to survive. Don't want to lose my cooking and my credibility.
Yeah,
And starting this, and it started to take off. Where now it is so funny that this is one of the biggest things going on,
yeah, it's wild.
where not restaurants are becoming obsolete, but these pop-ups and supper
Yeah,
clubs and these series that people are doing
yeah.
because it's innovative and it's hands-on and it's one-on-one. You get to really be intimate with the chef. But you started in your apartment?
I did. So I had just walked out of a job at a place called Hotel Griffou, which is no longer there anymore. And I took that job for the money, and this is always a dumb decision, I think. And but I was kind of in between things. I needed the money, so uh, obviously it didn't work out. And I ended up walking out, and I'm not really a flighty person. I'm pretty like reliable, or at least I hope that's how people see me.
Right.
Um, and so I didn't want to make that decision again of like, here's another job, right? And so at that time, my good friend Evan Rich and his wife, who Evan and I were the sous chefs at Boulet, and he had moved to California, to San Francisco, with his wife, and they were working at Quince, I believe it was, and so they were at the stage in their lives where they wanted to open their own place, and they were about to, and the space fell through, and so they started a supper club like once a week where they just had people over to the restaurant, and they did like, it wasn't small, but when I talked to them and I asked them why they were doing that, he's like, I think it was taking place at Quince the day that Quince was closed of the week, like a Monday or something. And he's like, we don't know how long it's going to take us to find our space, and we want to make sure our names stay out there, and
Right.
people
Stay
continue
prominent
to talk
and
about
yeah.
us. And I was like, that's a great idea, And so I started thinking about that, and of course, financially, it drives a lot of things. But for me, in particular, I started to get really kind of depressed because I wasn't cooking. I wasn't My creative outlet was gone, And you can cook at home for yourself, but like, it's
It's a
not
different energy.
it's different.
Not.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not.
different.
Yeah.
And so I had this, inspired by them, I was like, what if I, start a supper club, invite people I kind of know, I had a lot of friends at the time, who
Yeah.
were guests. And I was like, I'm sure I can do this, even if I just do it once or twice, just to feel some sort of satisfaction and wholeness again, And so I did. And I asked my sister, I was like, what should I call it? I need a cool name. And she's like, why don't you call it Un Segredo? I'm like, a secret?
I
I'm
like
like,
it.
that's good. I was like,
Yeah.
that's
Because
good.
it's like once you translate it, you're like, ooh, like,
Exactly. I
right?
was like, nice. And listen, I've always been proudly Portuguese,
Yeah.
and so I wanted a Portuguese element to it. And I was living on what really made it outside of obviously the cooking and the food was the fact that I was living on Roosevelt Island at the time, and I had this really great apartment on Roosevelt Island. It was a 4-bedroom apartment. I lived there with my brother and another one of my best friends, and our living room was huge. and the living room opened into the kitchen, and the whole thing was kind of an open plan. And so I had an open kitchen, this really big living room. I had a backyard, which you can access from the outside, from the courtyard, that you can walk right into. So I didn't have to like buzz people in or
Right.
things. So it was really easy. And so I was like, and then you had the tram in New York City where like no one had ever taken the tram because nobody was going to Roosevelt Island, but it was
That's
this really cool kind of thing, and it became an experience for people, which was hysterical. And I would put signs up that said un segredo with an arrow, and I would lead
follow
them to the backyard, and they would come to, and they would just be like, this is wild. This is so New York. It was like such a New York thing, like
yeah.
this secret place where you're going to have dinner and everything. And so it became wildly popular, like wildly popular. And I was doing it every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. At some point I did it in different locations because doing it in your apartment is a lot for
Oh
your
yeah.
roommates. But it became this very fulfilling thing where I always tell people that is the place where I learned like to appreciate things because as a chef you're in the kitchen, and if the kitchen's not in the dining room, right, you're in the kitchen. The only time you ever hear anything is a negative, when something is wrong. This
Right.
is bad, this person doesn't like that. That's the only feedback you're getting, right? And so it's kind of a negative experience being a chef, with the customer situation, where with this I had direct access to the guests, and I got to see them enjoying the things that I was doing and talk to them and explain. And I love talking, obviously, but like
Me
it,
too. Don't worry about
yeah.
it. Like, could you customize? You could be more creative. You could
You can be
create.
more creative. The immersion of the experience became extremely fulfilling, not only to the guests but to me. And so it was one of the best things I think I've ever done for myself, honestly. And then that led to Loro in the West Village. After that, I knew I was going to go do a restaurant eventually. I just didn't know when.
But do you
And so,
think that taking that time to do the supper club really not only ignited new spark for you because it was
without doubt,
dying out, like you were saying, you were a little depressed with it, and I get it. Like I need that too. Like
yeah,
I need to work because I love to work.
right.
But it's something about the energy and being in the kitchen and around food, and doing that might have given you such a big fresh take on it that
Yeah.
now you were ready to go in and do the restaurant.
Right, and that's kind of what it kind of sparked or revived, my career in a lot of ways, because at that point before I did that supper club, it was going in a really not good direction, like at all, And although I met with some really good people during that time, like
Yeah.
before the supper club, it just wasn't. I didn't know it wasn't. I was going through a divorce, right? I was freshly divorced. I didn't know what I really wanted to do. I love to cook. I love to cook, but like, what was that gonna? Was I gonna stay in it?
Keeping
And
that balance of
yeah,
what's going on in your own life as well as your career.
exactly. And so that supper club really kind of reignited, my passion for cooking and being a chef. And
I need to bring your people together.
it, that was the wildest part of that
Yeah.
whole thing, was that like I always used to tell people like it didn't matter what background you came from, because this was a communal table, right, of 16 to 20 people sometimes,
Right.
and nobody knew each other unless you were a guest, together guest. But so many people became friends at that table. So many people. I had a dentist. My dentist. That's how I met her. My doctor, who sadly just passed away. That's how I met him. My eye doctor. That's how I met him. Was through the supper club, and all these people became each other's clients and friends, and
Yeah.
they continue to go out to eat after the supper club. Because no matter what, no matter what background you came from, the thing you had in common was you came to Roosevelt Island to someone's apartment that you don't know to have dinner.
Yeah.
And you
That
had
sounds a little
that.
sus nowadays. Like,
Yeah, like you had that as the starting ground. Like that alone is interesting enough to
yeah,
like spark conversation.
conversation. Yeah.
And every dinner would start the same. It would be hysterical. It would be like kind of quiet. People are like kind of talking to their own, guests,
Right.
and then the food starts and people start talking about it to each other a little bit. And then by the end of the night, I'm like trying to kick people out of my apartment at
Let's
two
go,
in the
guys.
morning.
Dinner's over.
Yeah, it's like this is still my apartment, like it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, come on, like you got to get out of here. But and that's how it became, and
Oh.
that's why it was awesome. Like in the end,
No, I've owned restaurants, worked for restaurants, and one of the reasons I really loved the catering aspect for
yeah,
me was I really loved bringing people together. And it's kind of what I really try and drive home to people when it comes to food and like entertaining and pulling people around the dinner
hmm
table. But when I get to be with a family for their engagement party to their bridal shower
yeah,
to their first birthday, and then all of a sudden it's like you become part of this family,
yeah,
you learn about them, you meet their friends, and they all have the common interest of love of food and alcohol and spending time together, and it sparks something
yeah.
in them in the community, and I think that that's what we try and deliver when like you went to go open up a restaurant to deliver that same feeling.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's my brother always used to say, it's always someone's birthday, it's always someone's
Right.
anniversary. Like people, you're a part of people's celebration. Like that, like you are a part of it. In a lot of ways, and you don't have to be in it, but you're still a part of
You're
it.
part of it, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
when you opened up, it was in the West Village, you said,
yeah, 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 in the West Village.
and it was Portuguese skewed.
Yeah, somewhat. The name was. I mean, I figured I had such good luck with Un Segredo. Might as
Yeah.
well keep, might as well keep the Portuguese thing going.
Did you feel like you funneled in Portuguese flavors in the menu
I did,
or?
yeah, I did. Like
Yeah.
I always, not everything, obviously. I always used to call it like, the Portuguese explorers of old. Like so many things in Portugal, and I've become somewhat of a Portuguese historian of food, uh, where there's so many foods that are in our cuisine. I mean, cod, right? There's not a cod anywhere near the waters of Portugal. Why
Why
the
do you think
hell?
why did we salt it? You know,
Why,
because we had to keep it preserved until we got it
yeah, to
back to
keep
the
it
US.
preserved for the long trip from Scandinavia's to Nova Scotia. There's a whole Portuguese settlement in Nova Scotia that people don't even talk about. And
Yeah.
it's we as a people went and got a lot of signature dishes, that we still eat today. And listen, not everything good is good about colonialism and colonization and everything else. But the nobody, and I mean nobody, in my opinion, has had a larger impact on food than the Portuguese. And the evidence is still right in front of us. Things like a place like Goa, you know, Portuguese settlement. To this day, Goa's cash crop is a cashew. There's not a cashew anywhere near Goa, right? Cashews were brought from Brazil by the Portuguese to Goa and became a cash crop there. And there's so many examples of that between the
Right.
Japanese, and all that stuff. And I consider Loro an extension of that, where it became an extension of that where I wanted to do nothing but explore food. And I took that opportunity to explore as much food as possible in
Yeah.
that space. So it wasn't just Portuguese food, it
Or
was
yeah.
very much just an inspiration of food, and that's kind of how I treated it.
So in that community, the West Village, do you feel that it was embraced by the people that lived there that wanted to
Yeah.
dine out?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of people who came all the time. The reason why that restaurant closed is really just the economics of the city, you know, and
Yeah.
of
Which
a
unfortunately we can't
space.
control sometimes that as
No, I mean,
that's yeah.
I remember we were paying, at that point, we were paying 18,500 a month in rent. And this is a 60-seat restaurant. This isn't a big space, you know?
Right.
And the lease was coming to an end. I had taken it over when there was only like 3 years left on the lease. And the new landlord came in and wanted to negotiate the new lease. And his firm starting point was 30,000 a month. I just laughed at the table. I
Right.
literally laughed, got up, I said, "Good luck," and I walked away. Like I was just like, "This is stupid. Like this is not, you know, like who's gonna pay $30,000 for this 60-seat restaurant? You know, it's so crazy." And in the end, that's why it really, you know, ended up shutting down, which was fine. I was working myself to death at
Oh,
that
well, yeah,
place.
and I believe in it. When you own a restaurant, it's got to be
Yeah,
restaurant owner
I
operated.
was. Yeah, I walked out of that place with plantar fasciitis in both my feet so bad that I literally couldn't walk for a month after we
But
closed.
you got to get the orthotics in your feet.
Yeah,
You
yeah. I
know,
don't think anything
listen,
was gonna help at that point. It was just
that's the old lady in me speaking. Like when I got to be in the kitchen for 12 hours, I'm like, get my orthotics. I got to go in my my.
yeah, I know.
And then after that, you had a place called Fox Face.
Yeah, I went. I so when I closed Laurel, I got reached out to a mutual friend of mine reached out to me, and excuse me, a chef friend of mine who had a friend that it was her boss's brother actually, and they're from Louisiana, and this dude Ben wanted to open a soup company, and so I was kind of interested in the fast casual side of things, you know,
Okay.
because that's where the money was at that time, and so he reached out to me and asked if I was willing to help him, even if it was just kind of conversation, you know. And so I did, and I ended up becoming a part of Good Stock, and I helped create that company, and I did that for a couple of years before I left right at the start of the pandemic, and then I did some consulting work after that, and then basically 2.5 years ago, I helped open Fox Face.
What was like one of the biggest takeaways you got from the fast casual world? Because they're very different from your like if you look at your career,
They're so different.
right,
They're so different. And to me, probably one of the biggest takeaways was really like how much, you're not dealing with the same level of employee as far as like cooking is
right,
concerned. And
skill
that was
level,
kind
yeah,
of hard for me, because like I'm so passionate about what I do to these folks, and not that there's anything wrong with this, but it was just a job,
right.
it was just a job. So trying to get people on that same page as you is like really caring about it, was pretty hard to do, just
I could see that
the way it is.
definitely. You know,
The volume of things is much higher, when you're making 50 gallons of something instead of like a gallon of something, it's the scalability of it. And then beyond that, like the wildest thing was really like learning about the outsourcing process, like that, because everything has to be like FDA facilities.
right. You're buying from direct.
Well,
That
not
really,
that like, so if I want to make a chicken soup, right? Like our chicken soup, like I can't make that chicken soup really and sell it to people because it has to be, since it's meat, it has to be through an FDA facility that
oh,
gets inspected basically every day. And so you have to outsource anything that's meat based, right? So they have companies that do this. Like a place like Brodo has a company that makes their stock for them, right? And so going to this place and teaching them and trying to make this product in their facility how they have to make it, which is very different oftentimes than how you
right.
would make it, was super difficult. That was really, excuse me, that was really, really hard actually.
I'm assuming you probably learned some good people skills and
You have to, like, I mean,
communication
you
of
have to. It's just like you're a
yeah.
chef, you're, Yeah, you're a therapist, you're a
Yep.
consultant, yeah, you're a little bit of everything,
You're
You're,
janitor, you're
yeah,
all of it.
plumber,
So you said that that closed right now. Is it something that's going to reopen or that you would plan on working
Which
back
one?
into?
Good Stock or
Yeah.
Fox Face? Good Stock is
Fox-
closed. Good Stock they closed probably about 2 years ago. Just they just kind of ran out of money. It was kind of a small, and they couldn't. In the end, we couldn't really get the right company to like make the product, for us because
Okay.
that was the goal in the end was really to have someone else making your product, right? So you don't have to worry about hiring in restaurants and all that
Right.
stuff. And it just didn't end up working out. But you know, it's it is what it is. Ben's a good dude, and we ended on a really good note, he and I. So it just didn't work out, And then Foxface came after that.
Um, would would you say that that pivot was going to open up the next door for you? Because I know you do a lot of things on social media right now
Yeah, I
and trying to grow that platform.
after during the pandemic after the good stock closed, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Honestly, the pandemic had you know done a lot of things to the industry, obviously, and I
Yes.
wasn't super stoked about like jumping back into that pool. So I was kind of doing some private stuff, and some consulting, and then friends of mine decided they wanted to open a restaurant, and I've known them for 20 years, Ori and Savon, and we were actually going to open a restaurant way back in the day, and it didn't end up happening. They reached out to me, and I kind of avoided it. I was like, nah. I gave them a bunch of names of chefs. So I try this guy, I try this guy, and finally, she was like, Savon was just like, "Will you just help us? Like, come on, like, just
Do me a
let's
favor.
do this thing." And I was just like, fine. It's kind of reluctant, but I kind of looked at it as maybe like, I'm not getting any younger either, and I kind of looked at it as like, hey, maybe this will be, my last hurrah in the city. Who knows? Can I
Right.
make this work? And so we got together. The biggest thing about Foxface for me was very much it was initially really designed as like a break even operation. Like all they really wanted, they're well off and they love food, but what they really wanted in the restaurant was a place that served like crazy delicious food, not normal offerings. Like we never had like chicken on the menu or anything like that. It was very unique
Hmm.
with kangaroo tartare and sourcing fish and meats from all over the world, and just really kind of wanted to create this unique interesting space that really and truly no one else was doing at that time in the city.
Approachable for the outside person?
I would say it's very approachable for the experienced diner, not approachable for your average diner. It just,
Okay.
you
Like if
know,
you're curious and you're willing to
if you're
try
curious, yeah,
and
if you're into, different foods, for sure. Like, I think, it would be super interesting for someone who ate out a lot,
okay.
definitely not like a first date place. That's why I was my comparison to it. Like,
Well, kangaroo tartlet, like I've read,
yeah, like
might scare her off a little.
you're not taking a first date there. It's not it was never a place for that. It was very much meant for like foodies and people who are like super into an experience and dining differently.
Okay.
And
That's cool though, because there's not, doesn't have to be in the box. Like, you
yeah,
can,
exactly. Yeah, we created our own little box. In truth,
yeah.
like we were like, we were getting percibs from Portugal. Nobody was
I
getting
love
that. I
those.
love them too, but they don't. You don't see them here that often.
Oh no, people think it's weird. Like
Yeah,
it's,
it's not a thing. Our oysters were one day out of the water. Like our sourcing there was like the most ridiculous next level sourcing that you
that's amazing.
yeah, it was the ingredients we got were crazy, like crazy. Maybe some restaurants were getting one or two things, but as a whole, as a collection of ingredients, like it just Nobody
How
was
many seats was in the restaurant?
tiny, and that's the biggest issue actually. There's only 27 seats, so it's pretty small, and so in the end we closed. We're closed temporarily right now. They're still trying. The owners are still trying to decide what to do with the restaurant itself.
Okay.
But we got 3 stars from the New York Times. We were in the Michelin Guide. We were. I would imagine we would, if we had stayed, continuously open, we'd probably get in the Michelin Guide as a star this year. I mean, that was the hope anyway, or what we were working towards. But again, financially, it just 27 seats. You have to do X amount of covers. You gotta and it just wasn't. If it was a 40-seat restaurant, it would have been easier.
Yeah.
But it's just we were kind of in the middle of deciding what direction we wanted to go in, and do we want to do something a little, maybe perhaps a little bit more casual, still unique, but maybe a little bit more casual.
Taking it, yeah, not fine
Yeah.
dining. Yeah.
Or do we want to go the opposite of that? Do we want to go ultra fine dining and do like a $200 tasting menu and do 25 people a night, which is the other option. It's like Frevo. I don't know if you've ever been to Frevo. They're Portuguese and Brazilian, really great guys, Bernardo and Franco.
Okay.
Bernardo's from Setúbal, actually, and they own a restaurant called Frevo in I guess it's on the edge of the West Village. I guess maybe that's the Ranch Village, I think that would be called. The great restaurant, really great guys, but super fine dining. $250 tasting menu. They do 30 people a night. So very much that style. But in order to do that, you have to we had a very casual dining room.
Yeah, you have to elevate it up.
Yeah, you got to make those elevations. So we're kind of stuck in what we want to do right now. So.
And if they reopened, is it something that you would entertain to go back?
Yeah, it's something I definitely, again, I feel slightly unfinished just because I didn't get the Michelin star that I wanted. So I feel a little bit, like I was shortchanged a little bit,
Oh, no, yeah.
But I wanted to get 3 stars. We got the 3 stars, and and that was great. We accomplished many, many great things. We were one of the hottest restaurants for quite some time in the city. So a lot was accomplished there.
That's awesome.
But it's New York. It's kind of like
New York's ever changing. There's
always changing.
Always changing. There's always something.
Yeah.
I call it, New York is always going to be the scene where I can do bigger, better, or finer. Like, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been a tough city. I think it's tougher now more than ever, especially because the cost of everything is just so high.
Yeah.
People are just, and I understand, listen, I get it, but people are just unwilling to pay the real cost of food. And between,
I get it.
Between how much you have to pay people to work and how much you have to now pay for ingredients and rents and everything else, it's just, it's not a very sustainable business. It's never really been, but I feel like it's harder now than it's been in a long time.
Agreed. And even for someone like in the catering standpoint and like social media platforms, all that, and this is so basic to say it this way, but I cannot charge you $125 for a half tray of chicken parm.
I know.
But if I'm gonna put in my food costs, my labor costs, the container, the cheese,
that's the problem.
And sometimes for someone who's, I'm a workhorse. I will never say no. I will do everything. I roll up my sleeves. I love every aspect of this business. But to say no because it's going to be a loss to me, because there's plenty of times that I didn't say no, and then I'm wondering why I'm at a loss.
Exactly.
It burns, because at the end of the day, as much as I love it, it's still got to put a roof over my house, and it's
got to pay those bills. No one else is paying those bills.
And I think that's why people don't understand when they're like, "Oh, this restaurant just closed," or "You stopped working there." When I was like, you have to understand that the relevance of change in restaurant is so big, and it depends on the market, the industry, like all of it plays a part.
Everything affects restaurants. Restaurants in all aspects, every kind of restaurant. The dining out is considered entertainment. If there's any sort of uncertainty in the market or in government or in whatever, that feeling uncertainty, people start cutting out entertainment. So people stop going out to eat,
Yeah.
as a whole. And everything, it doesn't matter what it is, everything affects restaurants, your tariffs, your labor costs. I mean, labor I can't remember what the date is supposed to be, but New York minimum wage is going to $30 an hour in the next like 4 or 5 years. And listen, man, I'm an advocate of the people. Like,
Yeah.
I
But
want.
how are you going to price out your menu?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I want you to make as much. I loved my career. I love my career, but I would not change the way I worked for a thing, right? Like, I loved my crazy times at Boulet. I loved my crazy hours and no pay at Per Se, right? I was taking home $400 a week at Per Se, right? I don't expect that from people, and I don't expect that to be their lives,
Right.
Most chefs, owners, whoever, want to pay their people good wages and everything. But like this, if people are only willing to pay so much for food, which I understand, how are you supposed to, like, you can't raise prices? Like, it's this really.
Yeah, and I think that's how people now have tried to get creative with like the pop-ups, with
Yeah,
smaller
for sure.
things, and kind of stepping into that.
You have to have so many side hustles at this point, like in
Right.
life. I feel like, which is great. Like, great if you're on that hustle, you're on that hustle. Like we were just mentioned, like me on YouTube. Like, I started a YouTube channel because
Right.
I felt it was like a nice side hustle. But like, you know, you have to have those things in place. Before it was like a side hustle. Now it's like you have to, right? Like, it's like,
Social media is a full-time job.
yeah,
Anybody out there
like,
that listens to this podcast and they're like, yeah, I think I'm gonna just like start like a little thing. No, understand it is a full-time
yeah,
job.
it's no longer side hustles. It's like it's a
Do you
real.
like doing it?
I really enjoy doing it. I have a lot of fun. I do enjoy teaching, and
Me
showing
too.
people how to do things. Uh, some of the, well, I mean, you get so many idiots though sometimes that are just like, and
Oh,
I
I
fuck
know.
Portuguese.
Oh,
I
I
like to
know.
argue, right? So like,
Yeah.
you know, I like. There's not a troll that I won't engage with.
No, I kill him with kindness. I kill him with kindness.
I go the opposite.
Uh-huh.
Usually. I'm surprised some comments haven't been banned on YouTube yet. Let's just say that. I just don't like, I'm very intolerant of like ignorance and stuff. So it's just like, and I'm super open. And listen, I believe that people, believe what they do and whatever it is. But like, sometimes people say things that are just like, what compelled you to say that?
Yeah.
Like,
Why did
what?
you feel the need to
Yeah,
speak?
what? Like, just scroll on. Like, just scroll on. It's like, it's so crazy.
True.
But I do enjoy it. I do.
Well, you are
I try
putting
to have
yourself on
fun.
that platform to be out there in front of everyone. So
Yeah.
then it's like they feel like they have the right to have the opinion. So
Yeah, well, it's just, and it's funny because it's like, you are putting yourself out there, and I think chefs are fortunate to, or unfortunate to have to deal with a lot of this stuff every day. Every day you're being judged, right? As people are sitting in your dining room and they are judging you. Are you good? Are you worth it? Is this blah blah blah, whatever. And so I think as a profession, we're very used to being judged, all the time.
yeah,
It does translate. I think the ability to cope with it, I think, translates pretty well, into the social media. But it's just
yeah.
wild sometimes, some of the things people like are willing to say, and it's just like you're sitting, like, you're not putting yourself out there. Like, why? Like, you have some some
Cojones.
cojones. Exactly. I
Yeah,
don't want to say
some
it, but
cojones there. Like,
yeah, but you have some pretty big balls to be able to like just sit there from, like, what if I go to your job and like pull up a chair and just critique every little
right
thing?
there, buddy.
Yeah, just like, what's that? What's that? You know? But that is probably the least, best part of doing social media stuff. But I
I do
do
like
enjoy
to
it.
teach though.
Yeah, exactly.
I love to educate. I love when people are like, "Oh my God, thank you for showing me that. I had
Yeah,
no clue." And I'm like, and in my head sometimes I'm like, "Wow, you really like there are people that didn't grow up." And I feel like it is an upbringing. I think it is the way
for
you,
sure.
you know, I would never think not to put this in this bag and
Yeah,
save it in my fridge this way. Why? Because that's the way I've been shown forever. But
yeah,
a lot of people don't. And there is this thirst of knowledge that people want out there.
for
So I
sure.
think that creating content and being on that platform
Yeah,
opens that door where, and you get to cook and do
yeah.
fun things.
And knowledge is more accessible now than it's ever been.
Ah,
And I was saying this the
tip
other
of your
day, like,
fingers at all times.
yeah, it's you have $1,000 computer in your hands at all times. What I'm sure you remember, but if we wanted to know what Freddie Girardet was doing in France, like you had to go buy the book for $100 or whatever. It was probably
Yeah.
in French, so you couldn't read it unless you think, and you just like looked at the pictures, but you had to like go through this process to find out what other chefs were doing. And
I have a whole
now you just you got your
Yeah,
phone,
yeah.
you know what
It's
everybody's
not it's
doing.
immediate. You can find a recipe, and it's so funny because I just wrote my first cookbook, and the biggest thing was the question I asked is why was someone going to buy this book?
Right, sure.
Because at the end of the day, if you want to learn how to fry calamari, you can Google how do I fry calamari.
Right.
They want to buy the book because of the story and how I'm teaching them and
Exactly.
where the calamari
It's
comes
more
from.
than just the recipe. Yeah.
Right. And when I look back though, like so in my kitchen I have this huge bookshelf and it's all my cookbooks.
Yeah.
If you open my cookbooks, there are post-it
Yeah.
tabs
Notes. Yeah.
throughout the whole book
Yeah.
because it'd be to remember this because there was no site to go Google something
It wasn't an option.
or to find out why they did it this way or the process. It wasn't just explained to me in 2 seconds the way it is now.
Yeah.
But I never got rid of any, even my magazines, my article, like
Yeah.
everything is like noted because I think that there's some nostalgia to that and
Sure. Sure.
also the
Well,
learning
it's a
of
tangible. Again, it's a tangible thing,
tangible,
right?
yeah,
It's not just on your phone looking at it. Like you
yeah.
can thumb through the pages, and like there's definitely a romanticism behind it. For
Yes,
sure.
I like that word. Yes,
Yeah.
there is this like attraction to being
Yeah.
like getting a cookbook. I can go to Barnes and Noble, sit there and go in the cookbook section and
Yeah.
really
Totally.
look at
And,
different
and
things.
and I did. I used to. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't remember where the last Barnes and Nobles is anymore.
yeah, I know. Now you get it shipped to your front door.
Yeah, I live right by what do you call it? Kitchen Arts and Letters. It's right up
Oh,
here. So if you've not been to Kitchen Arts and Letters, you should go to Kitchen
no.
Arts and Letters. They're one of the oldest cookbook shops in New York City. They've been around 60 years or something like that.
Wow.
There's another one that's further downtown. I can't remember the name of it. Sarah
Okay.
Beth's or something. I can't remember. But Arts and Letters is where, as a cook in New York City, you went to get the books. Like they have every collection of every great
I
chef.
wrote that down because now
Yeah, you have to go. It's right here.
I,
It's on 97th in Lexington, I think it is 97, somewhere
okay.
right there. It's real right by my apartment.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Well, that means I'll come in. We'll go
yeah,
to lunch.
yeah. Tell me when you
We'll
come in.
go do
Yeah,
cookbooks.
absolutely. It's great. You'll love it if you like thumbing through cookbooks. You'll love Kitchen
Oh,
Arts and
that's
Letters.
awesome.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
so nerd.
really
You know, it's so funny. Even like when talking about this stuff, it's so nerdy, but I love it because it's
yeah,
like I don't know, it gets me
fantastic.
excited.
Yeah, exactly.
What on your YouTube do you feel
Mhm.
like it's been a success? Like, what's your most popular video or thing that you feel like you put out?
So it's funny. I haven't. It's random how some things are crazy popular that I didn't expect maybe, and other things where I expect would do well will do less well.
I feel you on that.
I'm not monetized yet, which I'm trying to work towards monetization right now. I have plenty of followers, but the problem in our field on YouTube is people are looking for answers fast. So the long viewing, like my friend has a true crimes podcast or what do you call it, channel,
Yeah,
and you're there for the story, right? So like
fearless.
you're
Yeah,
watching for 20 minutes or 30, whatever, however long it is, where like cooking, they're like people want answers fast, so they skip around and things like that. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to get people to maintain, viewership. But something small, like the most viewed video I have is a hamburger hack video that I did very quickly. It's like a minute long, and it was my buddy. It showed me way back when he makes his burgers, 4-ounce burgers. He takes a Chinese food lid, puts the 4-ounce burger into the lid, upside down, and then presses it with like a bottle or something, and it creates the perfect
Burger patty.
4-ounce burger patty. And it is wild. We were just talking about engagement. I can't remember how many views it has. It's got to be 500,000 or I can't even remember.
Over something just like.
It's so small, but it's even funnier the engagement that you get. Some people are like you were just saying, like, wow, like that's so smart, and like I never thought of that, right? And some people are like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, like dumb, like.
I did a thing. This was a couple years ago, salting meat, and it's just something that I was always taught to do.
Sure.
And the questions though, the engagement behind why would you salt and then wash your meat?
Yeah.
And it's like, but yeah, it's the teaching aspect, but at the same time, it's some of the simplest things. It's crazy the way it works.
I have found, I think that the simpler stuff. Listen, the things for me, the things that get the most views are always, something about burgers, something about pizza, something about hot dogs, something, like those things, the things that everybody knows and like it's relatable. People see that the most. The things that I might find more interesting, like I just posted a caldo verde recipe, and which I love, and I love that soup, and I want everybody to know how to make that soup, and it doesn't have a lot. It's got like 30, 40 views or something like that, where I thought something like that might have 100 plus views because I find it interesting.
Right.
People don't know what caldo verde is, right? So you have already limited your engagement, So everyone knows what a hamburger is. So it's like, sometimes you got to play that game, like.
There's a game to be played.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you say caldo verde, and I have my wrap up question for you is only because of you say caldo verde, then that's what I think in head. Are there any Portuguese recipes from your mom or that you grew up with that you make at home that you might have modified now after your experience being in the kitchen, working with some of these places and kind of tweaked it?
One of the most popular things that I almost always have on the menu is pastéis de bacalhau. And so I grew up fishing, like I said, on New Jersey, and we would catch sea robins. And a lot of people don't eat sea robins. They're kind of an annoying fish, but they are delicious. They're white flesh fish,
Yeah.
We would oftentimes keep them, and we would make pastéis out of them. And so my mom would bring them home. We would clean them up and season and salt them, and then potatoes and all that stuff. Yeah. So she had her recipe for pastéis, right? They weren't always bacalhau, but they were pastéis. And so I have carried that kind of recipe, made it my own a little bit, but I make them that was one of my ways of utilizing all the fish trimmings in the restaurant, was to make pastéis de bacalhau out of them. And so those are almost always on my menu. And I serve them with a smoked paprika aioli, and people go crazy.
I do mine with an aioli, and my mother was like, what is wrong with
people
you?
People love it. It's fried aioli, it goes.
So yeah, I do. I take the bacalhau, and then I boil my potatoes, and then I mash them with really good olive oil before I put in my mix. But I serve it with a lemon caper aioli with a shit ton of lemon zest in it.
Yeah.
And
that's fantastic.
When people try it, they're like, this is like I'm like, you like crab cakes, right? Like when you have to talk to people to understand, like, you like crab cakes? I love crab. Okay, so it's a fish cake, kind of like a crab, like then you get into the description of it.
Yeah, people, listen, people love fried stuff just in general. Like that's just
Really.
it's an easy thing to like. But like, you know, if you take like good fish and you salt it, and it doesn't have to be, cod that's already salted, but like people kind of, at least in the restaurant, people kind of understood it, and I always made it as an entry level thing. So it was like this $12 thing that like you can get and just try. So if you hated it, wasn't the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was like $12, But the chances of you hating it was like so slim, and people would just order them, and then everyone would want them at like parties, and like so they were always part of like past hors d'oeuvres and things like that, and they've become like one of the things that I have to have on, and it's
That's
just
awesome.
yeah,
And I love the way that it's changed over the time.
yeah, exactly. That and PD is a whole other thing though.
Oh. Well, see, I feel like we could talk about food forever, so that's
Yeah,
why we're gonna make a date. We're gonna make a date. I'm gonna come into the city. We'll go
perfect.
lunch, cook a little, cookbook shop.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
Yeah, no, I'd love. Thank you so much for doing this and being
My
on here
pleasure.
with me. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Before we go, could you let any one of our listeners find out where we could follow you? Are
Yeah.
you thinking about
So
doing
on
a pop-up?
Instagram, I still have my Un Segredo
Okay.
NYC tag, and then on YouTube, Chef David Santos. Very simple, straightforward. Is the YouTube channel. Go give it a follow. Watch some videos.
Definitely.
Those are my two social medias. I don't do any of the other stuff. It's too complicated for
There's
me.
too many. And there is. There's just too many.
I can't. I
No,
can't.
thank you so much. Great. And you have an awesome career.
Thank you. I
Just
appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
best of luck to anything you do in the future. I think you'll
Thanks.
kill it.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, knock on wood.
Yeah, right. Knock on wood.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. This has been From Portugal with Love, and I'm your host, Lauren Covis. This podcast was produced by Curious Monkey Entertainment. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on all of our social media platforms at Chef Lauren Covis. Also, please remember, until next time, savor the moment.